Months later, the chapel stood quiet and empty. Dust floated in the sunlight coming through the stained glass windows. Rows of wooden benches stretched out, untouched. The air smelled faintly of old flowers and wood polish. Omoni stepped inside alone. She wasn't wearing a dress this time, just jeans, sneakers, and a soft gray sweater. No bouquet, no music, just silence. She stood at the door for a moment, looking down the aisle. The same aisle where everything fell apart. The place where her heart had almost shattered in front of everyone. Slowly, she started walking. Her steps were steady. Her hands relaxed by her side. Her face calm. There was no one watching. No crowd. No pressure. Just her. When she reached the front, she stood still. She looked around at the quiet space, then up at the soft light pouring in. She smiled, not a big smile, but a real one. A voice played in her head, clear and strong. Some people give you away without saying a word. But walking yourself forward? That's power. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and walked out the doors alone, but not empty. She was free. Fade to black. Hey besties, if you made it this far, you're the real MVP. Don't forget to like, drop a comment, share with your people, and of course, subscribe for more stories like this. Love you, bye.
Amara Johnson grew up in Houston, Texas, in a small brick house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. Her family was Nigerian American, proud of their roots, and hardworking. Life was not always easy, but her parents tried their best to give their children a good future. Her father passed away when she was just 12. The memory of his gentle laugh and the way he always told her she was special stayed with her, but after he was gone, everything changed. Her mother, Ruth, became the foundation of the family. She worked long hours as a nurse, taking extra shifts, sometimes coming home with aching feet and tired eyes. She carried the weight of two parents on her shoulders, and Amara never doubted that her mother loved them. But Ruth leaned heavily on her older son, Daniel. To her, Daniel was the pride of the family, the responsible one, the star, the child who seemed to have everything figured out. Daniel was 4 years older, tall, confident, and sharp with his words. He was the one relatives bragged about during family gatherings. Daniel is at the top of his class. Daniel is going to be a lawyer. Daniel will take care of this family. Every achievement of his was celebrated like a festival. For Amara, life was different. School never came easy to her. Numbers slipped out of her mind. Textbooks made her restless. She loved solving problems in her own way, on computers, tinkering with code, building little projects nobody paid attention to. But compared to Daniel's polished achievements, her efforts looked small and childish. At least that was how her family made her feel. By the time Amara reached college, she was struggling to keep up with grades. The lectures bored her, the pressure drained her, and the feeling of failure grew heavier every semester. Finally, she dropped out, unable to bear it any longer. She told herself it wasn't the end. She believed she had found her true path: technology, apps, and creating solutions. But to her family, it looked like shame. Daniel never missed a chance to remind her. He called her lazy, reckless, a waste of money and time. Sometimes he said it with laughter, sometimes with sharp anger, but always with the same sting. Mom is breaking her back for you, and this is what you give her? Nothing. What he never saw, what nobody knew, was that Amara was not doing nothing. At night, while the house was asleep, she sat on the floor with her laptop, coding. She built small apps, took freelance jobs online for little pay, and learned from free tutorials. She pushed herself to stay awake even when her eyes burned. Every error in the code, every failed attempt, only made her more determined. She wanted to prove that she was not useless. She wanted to show her mother that the sacrifice was not wasted. She wanted Daniel to stop seeing her as a failure. Yet, no matter how hard she worked, the house felt colder every day. Daniel's scorn was loud and constant, but her mother's silence cut even deeper. Ruth loved her, but she did not know how to defend her against Daniel's strong voice. When arguments broke out, Ruth would tell them both to be quiet, but the weight always fell on Amara's shoulders. Amara carried a quiet pain in her heart. She loved her family with everything in her, yet she felt invisible, like her dreams did not matter. Every time she tried to speak about her ideas, her words were brushed aside. Every time she reached out, she felt ignored. Still, she refused to let go of her spark. Somewhere deep inside, she believed that her path, though lonely, was leading her somewhere bigger than anyone could see. She just wished, more than anything. The family dinner started warm, the smell of jollof rice and grilled chicken filling the house, the sound of cousins laughing in the living room. Amara sat at the dining table, her heart racing. She had been waiting for this moment for weeks. She had built a small demo of her app and wanted to share it with her family. For once, she wanted them to see what she was working on, to understand why she had left college, why she spent long nights in front of her laptop. When everyone settled down, she cleared her throat and spoke. "I want to tell you all about something I've been building," she began. Her voice shook at first, but she pressed on. She explained her idea, an app that connected Nigerian students to affordable online tutors, a platform to make learning easier for young people who didn't have access to private lessons. She talked about how she had coded the first version by herself and how she believed it could grow into something bigger. At first, the table was quiet. A few aunts nodded politely. Her mother looked at her with soft eyes, but Daniel leaned back in his chair with a smirk. Then he laughed. The sound was sharp, cutting through the silence. "You're chasing pipe dreams while real adults build careers," he said loudly. Everyone's eyes turned to him. "Amara, do you think building some small phone app is the same as a career in law or medicine? You dropped out of school, and now you're playing with laptops like a child. Who is going to take you seriously?" Amara's cheeks burned. She gripped her fork tightly, trying to steady her voice. "It's not just a game, Daniel. This can help people. I believe in this." Daniel scoffed. "Believe all you want. Belief doesn't pay bills. Belief doesn't make you successful. You're wasting mom's money and everyone's time. Look around, Amara. We're all building something real. And you? You're just chasing shadows." Her mother spoke up then, her voice quiet but firm. "Daniel, that's enough. Let her speak. At least she's trying." But Daniel shook his head, his words rolling over hers. "Mom, you're too soft on her. She's been playing this game for too long. If she's serious, let her prove it without leaning on you, without draining this family. Cut her off, and then we'll see if she survives." The room grew tense. Amara felt her throat tighten. She looked around, hoping anyone, would defend her. But most of the relatives stayed silent, some even nodding slightly, agreeing with Daniel's harsh logic. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't fight back. The final blow landed when Daniel leaned across the table and said, "You'll never grow if you keep getting handouts. If you think you're so brilliant, then go. Survive on your own. Build your empire without us." The words stabbed deep. Amara swallowed hard, her chest aching. She wanted to scream, to tell them that she had already been surviving, already been working harder than they could imagine. But no one would listen. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the laughter of cousins faded, Amara packed her things. She put her laptop in her backpack, stuffed in a few clothes, and zipped it up with trembling hands. Her mother stood at the doorway, silent tears running down her face. "I'm sorry," Amara whispered, hugging her tightly. "I have to do this." Ruth nodded weakly, her voice breaking. "Be safe, my daughter. Don't let their words kill your spirit." Amara walked out of the house with her backpack on her shoulders, her heart heavy but burning with a new fire. She had no money, no room to sleep in, and no safety net. All she had was her laptop, her code, and her will. The pain of betrayal cut deep, but under it, A stronger feeling grew. She would prove them wrong. She would survive. And one day, they would remember this night, not as the first nights away from home were the hardest. Amara had nowhere steady to sleep. Sometimes she stayed with a friend for a day or two. Sometimes she dozed off in the corner of a 24-hour cafe, her backpack as her pillow. When she had a little money, she rented a cheap bed in a hostel. When she didn't, she stayed awake in cyber cafes, the bright screens keeping her company while her fingers typed line after line of code. She lived on bread rolls and instant noodles, stretching every naira she had. Her laptop became her lifeline. By day, she scoured online job boards, applying for freelance coding gigs that barely paid enough for food. By night, she worked on her app, fixing bugs, adding features, pushing herself until her eyes blurred. It was a lonely, grinding existence. She watched other young people laugh and share meals, while she counted coins to buy internet time. She cried silently more than once, wiping her face quickly so no one would see. But even in the darkest hours, when her stomach growled and her body begged for rest, she whispered to herself, "Don't quit. Don't prove them right." When she finally managed to secure a meeting with investors, she dressed in her only neat blouse, smoothed her hair, and walked into the polished offices with trembling hands. She pitched her idea with all the passion she had. But instead of encouragement, she faced smirks and dismissive glances. One man leaned back in his chair and said, "You're too young. Where's your degree? You think people will trust a dropout?" Another laughed and added, "You're a woman. Tech is not for you. Don't you think you should do something easier?" Amara left those meetings with her heart heavy, but each rejection only pushed her to work harder. She told herself that someone, somewhere, would see the value in what she was building. But the pain deepened when she heard what Daniel had been saying. A cousin she trusted called her one evening and whispered, "Amara, Daniel told the family you're lost. He said you've been failing, maybe even on drugs. That's why you don't come home." Her chest tightened, the world spinning around her. She sank onto a chair in the cafe, her hands shaking. To think that her own brother would spread such lies just to bury her deeper, it was almost too much to bear. She felt crushed under the weight of shame, anger, and sorrow. For a moment, she thought about giving up. She imagined herself going back to school, begging Daniel for forgiveness, living quietly in the shadow of others. It would be easier than this endless fight. She sat there, staring at her screen, tears falling freely onto the keyboard. But then she remembered the faces of the young students she had been building her app for. Children who couldn't afford private tutors, kids who wanted to learn but had no help. She thought about her father's gentle voice, telling her she was special, and her mother's tearful hug the night she left home. Something inside her hardened. No, she thought, I will not stop. Not now. She kept going. She improved her app, polished the design, made it faster and easier to use. And then slowly something changed. One morning, she logged in to check her dashboard and saw a spike in activity. Dozens of new users had signed up overnight. Within a week, it became hundreds. Teachers were recommending her app to their students. Young people across Nigeria were using it to prepare for exams, leaving messages of thanks in the feedback section. "This is helping me so much. Please don't stop, Ma. You're changing lives." Amara stared at those words with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of pain this time, but tears of hope. For the first time, she knew she was not just chasing dreams. She was building something real. Soon, small investors began reaching out. A local entrepreneur offered to mentor her. A Nigerian tech blog featured her app, calling it a rising star in digital education. Amara felt the tide turning. She still struggled, still fought through sleepless nights and endless stress, but she finally saw a light ahead. Meanwhile, Daniel's world was not as perfect as it looked. His law career, once the pride of the family, was showing cracks. He had taken on too many cases, chasing recognition and money. His arrogance made him enemies, and some of his clients were unhappy with his results. But Daniel, unwilling to admit weakness, hid it all. At family gatherings, he wore fine suits, spoke loudly about his big wins, and looked down on everyone else. Behind the mask, however, the pressure was eating at him. Amara did not know all of this yet. She was too busy fighting her own battles. But fate was already weaving their stories together, preparing the day when brother and sister would collide again, not as family, but as rivals in a world much bigger than the walls of their old home. The hall buzzed with energy as the Lagos Tech Future Conference kicked off. Screens glowed with bold presentations, investors filled the seats, and young innovators waited nervously for their chance to pitch. Amara stood backstage, smoothing her dress, her heart thudding in her chest. This was the biggest stage she had ever been invited to. Her app, now gaining thousands of users every month, had caught the attention of international investors. Tonight could change everything. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage with steady steps. The spotlight hit her, and for a moment, she remembered those long nights in cyber cafes, the hunger, the tears. Now she faced a packed hall, her logo shining on the giant screen. She began her pitch with quiet confidence, explaining how her app was changing access to education, how it was already helping students across Nigeria, and how it could grow even further with support. She spoke with clarity, her voice carrying both passion and proof. By the time she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Investors leaned forward, excited, scribbling notes. But then came the twist she hadn't expected. The moderator announced a legal challenge. A corporate law firm had filed a claim against her company, accusing her of breaching a contract. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Amara's stomach tightened as she turned to see who was leading the charge. Daniel. Her brother stepped into the spotlight in his polished suit, carrying a folder thick with papers. The sight of him hit her like a punch to the chest. He stood tall, confident, the same mocking smile she remembered from that family dinner years ago. "This so-called company," Daniel began, his voice smooth and commanding, "has failed to honor agreements made during its early development stage. Contracts were broken. Promises were not kept. Investors should be warned before putting money into something so unstable." Gasps and murmurs filled the hall. Amara's mind raced, but she forced herself to breathe. This was her moment. She could not crumble now. Daniel smirked at her. "Still chasing shadows, Amara? You can't build an empire on dreams. Not in the real world." She stepped forward calmly, her eyes locking on his. "Is that what you call the real world, Daniel? Lies and intimidation." She turned to the audience. "What my brother is presenting is not the truth. My company has honored every agreement. The so-called breach he's referring to is fabricated by a competitor afraid of losing ground. And the lawyer representing them," she looked back at Daniel, her voice sharp, "is my brother, the same person who once called me a useless dropout." The crowd stirred, whispers rising like a wave. Daniel's confident smile faltered for the first time. Amara lifted a file of her own. "Here are the records. Every contract, every payment, every agreement signed. Verified. Transparent. Nothing is missing. Nothing is hidden." She laid the documents on the table for the panel to see. One of the investors leaned forward, scanning the pages. "She's right. Everything checks out. There's no breach here." Another investor stood. "If anything, this attempt to discredit her only shows how threatening her innovation has become. That's a sign she's doing something powerful." Applause spread across the hall, stronger this time, directed at Amara. Daniel's face darkened. He opened his mouth to fight back, but his words stumbled. The polished lawyer, who once commanded rooms with ease, was suddenly standing small in front of the sister he had mocked. Amara did not raise her voice. She did not gloat. She simply looked at him and said, "I built this from nothing. I survived without support, without family backing, without handouts. You told me I was nothing. Today, the world sees that you are wrong." The applause grew thunderous. Investors gathered around her, offering support, exchanging business cards, and praising her strength. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment of her triumph. Daniel stood frozen, the reality sinking in. In front of everyone, in the very space he had tried to humiliate her, he had been outsmarted and outshined. His sister, the useless dropout, had risen higher than he ever imagined. Amara stepped down from the stage, her heart pounding, her trophy of victory not in gold, but in the undeniable respect she had just won. And as she walked past Daniel, she did not stop to argue. She only whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "This is my real world now." The days after the conference moved like a storm, but for Amara, it was a storm of blessings. News outlets across Nigeria carried her story. Young woman builds education app, defeats false claims, wins investors' trust. International platforms picked it up too. Her inbox filled with messages from venture capitalists, mentors, and educators from all over the world. Within months, she closed major deals that pushed her company into global markets. Her small app became a full company, with teams working in Lagos, Nairobi, and even New York. The numbers grew faster than she had dreamed. Millions of users, partnerships with schools, recognition from tech giants. When the valuation hit $100 million, Amara stood in her new office, looking at the city skyline, almost unable to believe it. She remembered sleeping in cyber cafes, surviving on bread rolls, and whispered to herself, "Look how far we've come." But success did not erase the past. Daniel avoided her for weeks after the conference. The family whispered about him, how some of his cases had fallen apart, how his arrogance had pushed clients away, how the conference humiliation had left a mark. For the first time, the golden child stood in the shadows. One evening, Amara's mother came to her office. Ruth's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her daughter tightly. "I always knew you had greatness in you," she said, her voice trembling. "Forgive me for not protecting you enough. Forgive me for not shouting louder when he called you names. But I prayed for you every day." Amara held her mother close, feeling the weight of years lift from her shoulders. "You don't have to say sorry, Mom. You gave me strength. Even in silence, I knew you loved me." Not long after, Daniel finally came to see her. He looked tired, his pride chipped away. For the first time, his eyes did not hold arrogance. "You proved me wrong," he admitted quietly. "I thought I was helping the family by pushing you down, but I see now. I was just afraid. Afraid that you might rise higher than me." Amara listened, her heart torn between anger and pity. Part of her wanted to remind him of the nights she went hungry, the lies he spread, the pain he caused. But another part of her knew that holding on to anger would chain her down just as much as it chained him. She took a deep breath. "Daniel, I don't hate you. I won't destroy you. But things cannot go back to the way they were. I worked too hard to earn this peace. From now on, I choose who I let close to me, even if they share my blood." Daniel lowered his head, silent. It was not forgiveness he had earned, but a boundary he had to respect. For Amara, that was the true victory. Not just the money, not just the fame, but the strength to rise above bitterness. She had built an empire from ashes, turned betrayal into fire, and claimed her place with dignity. And though the scars of the past remained, they no longer held her down. They had become proof of her survival, proof of her power. The night sky over Lagos glittered with 1,000 lights as Amara stood on the rooftop of her company's new headquarters. In her hand, she held the award she had just received, African Innovator of the Year. Cameras had flashed, crowds had cheered, but now it was quiet. Just her, the city, and the weight of her journey. She lifted the award gently, running her fingers over the engraved letters. In her mind, she heard Daniel's old voice, sharp and cruel. "You're a useless dropout. You'll never be anything." For a moment, the memory stung. But then, like a tide washing over the shore, another voice replaced it, her own. Steady, calm, certain. "I am not what they called me. I am what I built." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not from pain. They were from pride. She thought of the young girls who sat in cyber cafes just like she once did, trying to learn, trying to fight, trying to believe they could make it in a world that told them they couldn't. She thought of her mother's trembling words, of the students who first believed in her app, of the nights she almost gave up. She raised the award higher, as if the stars themselves could witness her vow. "This is for every girl who was ever called useless for daring to dream," she whispered. "This is proof that we are more than their words. We are what we choose to build." The wind swept gently across her face, carrying away the last shadows of doubt. Amara smiled, not the smile of someone who had won against others, but the smile of someone who had finally won against herself. And as she stood on that rooftop, the city alive beneath her, she knew with absolute certainty, the next day, everything changed. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this powerful story. Imagine being called useless by your own brother, only to rise and build a $100 million empire that proves him wrong. Amara's journey shows us that no insult can stop true determination. If you enjoyed